know you prefer to have more accurate results, but the fact is people don't know that therefore will answer inaccurately.
This relates to, I suppose, just keep lists of answer options as short as you can. I mean, obviously you want a nice, well-rounded list because you don't just want everybody to be ticking other. If your list is nice and well-rounded and includes all of the things that it should do, then you should get really quite a small portion of people ticking other. But at the same time, you don't want to make your list too long, and there's a couple of reasons for this. First one being because respondents will get bored, they'll stop reading, they'll forget what was at the beginning of the list by the time they get to the end. But the second one is, if you're looking for a nice big percentage to report in your press release, something that's newsworthy, quite strong, attracts a lot of attention, if you've got too many options, you're not going to get half of people agreeing with one option. The responses are going to be diluted, and you might end up with only 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3% of people agreeing with each option, which isn't as newsworthy as if you've got sort of a nice big bold percentage to work with. I said this earlier, start with generalities, then move to specifics. This is because you want to get your respondent thinking about the issue generally and lead them nicely towards your more in-depth questions. Say, for example, if you want to ask about people's savings and investments, you want to ask them which ones they have, first of all, so do you have an ISA, do you have any equities, blah, blah. And then move to how often do you review these, or what are your plans for these over the next 6 months. You want to lead nicely the respondent down the lane, so to speak. Yeah, so just another thing on this is always these are good guidance rules for you guys, but obviously your research agency should be helping you with this, and you should feel like you can send your questions to them and ask them for their advice on any of these things. So although these are guidance, when you're coming up with your questions, your research agency should be helping you to make sure that your questions are along these guidelines. These are some more general issues to think about, which I sort of got into on the last 2 slides. But as I was saying, people forget what's happened to them before. If you ask someone something like, how many hours did you spend driving last month? Or approximately how many days in the last month have you bought a cup of coffee from a coffee shop on your way to work? People are just going to guess that because they won't remember. So you need to account for that and keep it. It's another thing, keeping things nice and close to the present. It's better to ask people about in the last week than in the last month, perhaps. People find it hard to say why if they're not given options. So if you're asking, say, an open-ended question, so why do you feel this way? It's much easier for the respondent to answer without really thinking about it too much if you give them a prompted list to just choose from. But again, this list should be unbiased, so you shouldn't be influencing the respondent's opinion by providing an unbiased list that maybe has more options in one direction than the other. As I said before, they find it hard to think about the future. People have no idea really what they're going to be doing 5 years from now. And also the interview itself can change the respondents. And Jeremy was saying about this earlier. It's really important what order your questions are in. You need to think about whether the answer they've given to a question is going to influence the questions that their later answers, basically. And there are a number of other things that can affect survey results, and your research agency should again be able to advise you on these. Another thing to do is to think about your objective when you're coming up with your questions. So this is another area where your research agency can be really invaluable. Is your question and the way you're asking it actually going to get you the data you think it is? And this is a classic thing we see quite a lot of the time is people think, oh, we want to create a top 10 TV shows for the British public or something like this. And people will think, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to get each respondent to rank their top 10 TV shows. So this is my favourite, this is my second favourite, this is my third favourite. Not only is this quite hard for respondents to do, this actually doesn't provide you with a top 10 data when you amalgamate all the people's results together. What you need to do is just ask people, what is your favourite TV show? And then from their responses, you can put together the top 10. I always find a really useful way to think about this is to think about 40 favourite singles. A couple of people just decide, okay, I like this one, I'll have maybe 2 of them, and depending on how everyone's buying comes together, the top 40 just falls out. So now, those are like the good rules of questionnaire design, and now we can go into a bit of the bad and the ugly side of questionnaire design. So things you probably should not be doing. Common things to avoid, missing responses, and I talked about this a bit earlier. It's key to make sure that your list is well-rounded and well thought out. You don't want to ask which supermarket you shop at, and have Asda, Tesco, Aldi, etc., but not Sainsbury's. This is again going to end up, if you've got an other, you'll have lots and lots of people ticking other. If you don't have